Wait until you hear this. I was erased from my family. My own children rejected me. Not because I was a bad mother, though that's what they told everyone, but because I made a choice they couldn't accept. So I left. For 10 years, I stayed away. No phone calls, no holidays, no contact. And then one day, I decided I was done being invisible. I showed up at a family gathering that I wasn't invited to, and when they saw me, the room went absolutely silent. By the end of the night, my children were crying, and everything they thought they knew about me had been turned upside down. If you want to know what I said that day, what revelation changed everything? What secret I'd been carrying for a decade? Stay with me. And please, before we start, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because this story has a twist that is going to shake everything you believe about loyalty, sacrifice, and the price of being a woman who refuses to disappear. Let's go. My name is Grace Chen, and I'm 60 years old. For 10 years, I was dead to my children. Not legally, that would have been simpler, somehow. But emotionally, practically, in every way that mattered, I was erased. I was the mother who walked away. The selfish mother. The mother who chose a man over her own children. That's what they told people. That's what they believed. And I let them believe it because the truth was more complicated. And complicated truths don't fit neatly into family narratives. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't start with rejection or erasure. It starts with love. It starts with me at 23 years old meeting a man named David Chen at university and feeling like my life was finally beginning. David was brilliant, physicist who could explain the nature of black holes in a way that made my brain hurt and my heart race. He was kind. He was ambitious. He was, by every measure, a good man. We got married when I was 25. I had our first child, Michael, when I was 26. Then Emma came 2 years later. For a decade, we were a family that looked like what happy families are supposed to look like. David and I worked. I was an accountant. David was a researcher. We both made good money. We bought a house. We took vacations. We had dinner parties. We were, by all external measures, successful. But there's always something underneath the surface of successful marriages. There's usually resentment. For me, it was that I'd given up my ambitions. I'd been on track to become a partner at my accounting firm when Michael was born. But childcare was expensive and someone had to be flexible, and that someone was always me. I stepped back to part-time. Then, when Emma came, I stepped back further. By the time Emma was in school, I was working 3 days a week and managing the household the other 4. David's career, meanwhile, had exploded. He was publishing papers. He was traveling internationally. He was becoming the person he was meant to be. And I was becoming smaller. I didn't blame him. That would have been too simple. I blamed myself for not being able to hold both things, a career and a family. I blamed the impossible standards that expected women to do both perfectly. I blamed biology for making me the one who could get pregnant, and was therefore expected to be the one who would sacrifice. By the time I was 40, I was exhausted in ways I couldn't articulate. I was still working 3 days a week. Michael was 16. Emma was 14. David was traveling 2 weeks out of every month. The house was always a mess. I was always behind. I was always failing at something. That's when I met Richard. Richard was a colleague at the accounting firm. He was 15 years older than me, recently divorced. It's kind in a way that felt almost shocking after years of David's distracted affection. He noticed me. He asked about my day. He listened when I talked. He made me feel like I mattered. We started having coffee. Just coffee. Then lunch. Then, after 3 months of lunches and an increasing emotional intimacy that felt like drowning in the best way, we kissed. I didn't sleep for a week after that. I felt guilty and exhilarated and terrified in equal measure. I was also, for the first time in years, alive. I told David I wanted a divorce. I didn't tell him about Richard. I didn't need to. The fact that I was leaving was enough. His response: "You're having a midlife crisis. You'll regret this. The kids need stability. The kids need a happy mother," I said. They need both parents. They need you to be a wife. We went to marriage counseling. The counselor asked if I wanted to save the marriage. I said no. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. David got angry. He said I was being selfish. He said I was throwing away 25 years of partnership. He said I was going to destroy our children. I left anyway. Michael was the first to reject me. He was 16, old enough to understand that his mother had chosen a man over her family. Old enough to be angry. Old enough to decide that my choice made me a bad person. How could you do this? He asked when I came to pick him up a week after I'd moved out. How could you just leave us? I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving your father. You left the house. You left our family. Still your mother. My mother would never abandon us for some guy. The words hit like stones. Emma was quieter in her rejection. She was 14, still processing her own identity, and my leaving felt to her like betrayal of the foundational understanding of womanhood. I'd modeled for her that you sacrifice. You stay, you suffer quietly. You don't leave. I thought you were strong, she said when I tried to explain. I thought you taught me that women don't need men. And then you left Dad for one? It's not about Richard. It's about me. It's always about you now, isn't it? David's family rallied around him. His mother told people I was selfish. His brother said I was having a breakdown. His friends' stopped calling me. Some made it clear that leaving a man like David for a man like Richard was a moral failing. David, for his part, played the role of the abandoned husband beautifully. He never said a bad word about me directly, but he told the children how sad he was, how he didn't understand what he'd done wrong, how he hoped their mother would come to her senses. Meanwhile, my relationship with Richard deepened. We got an apartment together. We got a dog. We took vacations. We built a life that was separate from the life I'd had before, and it was good. It was genuinely, unexpectedly good. But Michael and Emma wouldn't forgive me. Not at first. Not at 5 years. Not at 10 years at the 5-year mark. I tried. I called Michael. He was 21 by then. In college and asked if we could have coffee. He agreed. And I felt hopeful for the first time in years. We sat across from each other in a cafe, and he looked at me like I was a stranger. I'm getting married, he said. That's wonderful. Tell me about her. It's a good woman, not like you. The words were casual but devastating. Michael, I know you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Done trying to understand why my mother chose a random guy over her own family. Done pretending that you didn't hurt us? You made your choice. Live with it. You got married 3 months later. I wasn't invited. I found out through Facebook. Emma, at least, responded to cards and emails. But her words were cold. I'm glad you're happy with Richard. I hope he was worth what you lost. What I lost. As if I'd had a choice between two things and I'd simply picked the wrong one. As if leaving hadn't cost me everything. By year 10, I'd made peace with being erased. Richard was enough. Work was enough. Friends I'd made after the divorce were enough. The relationship with my children was too painful to keep trying. And then, at 60, something shifted in me. I was at a networking event for work, and I saw a woman about my age talking to a group of younger professionals. She was confident, articulate, alive in a way that made me remember something I'd almost forgotten. I wasn't just Richard's girlfriend, or the selfish mother who left. I was a person. I had a life. I had value independent of anyone else's narrative about me. And I was tired of being invisible to my own children. I did some research. Michael had 2 kids now. Emma had moved back to our hometown. David was remarried. Life had gone on without me. The world hadn't stopped. My absence was notable only to me. I called Michael one day. I want to see you, I said. I don't think that's a good idea. I know you don't, but I'm asking anyway. He was quiet for a long time. Then why now? Because I'm 60 years old and I'm tired of being the villain in everyone else's story. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop. He brought his wife and one of their children, a strategic move that made a private conversation impossible. We exchanged pleasantries. He didn't introduce me to my grandchild. His wife was polite but distant. After an hour, they left. I reached out to Emma. She was easier, or maybe just different in her rejection. She was willing to talk, though the conversation went nowhere productive. She wanted to know if I was happy. The word carried accusation. Yes, I said. I'm happy. Are you? Happiness isn't the point, Mom. Responsibility is. Family is. You chose yourself. I did, and I'd do it again. The honesty shocked her, I think. She wasn't expecting me to stand by my choice. After that conversation, I made a decision. I was going to stop asking for permission to be in their lives. I was going to show up, and I was going to be honest. And I was going to let them decide what to do with that dot. I found out through Facebook, of all places, that Michael was having a family gathering, a milestone birthday for his son, my grandson, whom I'd never met. It was a Saturday in June. The location was posted in the comments. No one had invited me, but no one had explicitly uninvited me either. I called Richard. I'm going to do something that might not go well, I said. What are you going to do? I'm going to crash a family party, Grace. That's probably not, I know, but I'm doing it anyway. I drove 6 hours to the town where I'd grown up, to the park where Michael was celebrating his son's birthday. I wore a nice dress. I did my hair. I looked like what a grandmother should look like, put together, ready, present. I looked like I had something to say. Michael saw me first. He was standing with his wife, and his face went completely white. What are you doing here? His voice was cold, shocked. I'm here to see my family, I said calmly, specifically to congratulate my grandson on his birthday. You're not welcome here. I know. Then why? Because for 10 years I've been waiting for permission to exist in your life, and I'm done waiting. I'm done pretending that your anger is more important than my presence. I'm done being erased. The people around us had gone quiet. Michael's wife looked mortified. My grandson, 12 years old, caught between two versions of his grandmother, the one he'd been told about, and the one standing in front of him, looked confused. Do you want to know the truth about why I left your father? I said, looking directly at Michael. I don't care. Your father was having an affair. He'd been having affairs for years. I found out when you were 15 and Emma was 13. I was going to leave him. And he told me that if I did, he'd convince you both that I was the villain. He said he'd tell you I was selfish, unstable, having a breakdown. He said he'd make sure you'd never forgive me. So I left quietly. I left with my head held high. And I've spent 10 years letting you believe a lie. Michael's face had gone from white to red to a complicated shade of purple-red that suggested internal conflict. You're lying, he said, but his voice wavered. Ask your father. Emma had appeared during this conversation. She'd come around the corner with her own family. She was staring at me with something close to horror. Why are you just telling us this now? She asked. Because for 10 years I thought if I gave you space you'd eventually understand. I thought I could be the bigger person, and eventually you'd see that my choice to leave was about saving myself, not abandoning you. But I was wrong. I was trying to be noble, and noble just meant silent. And silence meant you got to believe whatever narrative was most convenient. This doesn't change anything, Michael said. But his wife had grabbed his arm, and I could see the doubt forming in his eyes. You're right. It doesn't change the fact that I left. It doesn't change that I chose Richard over your father. But it might change how you understand why. I spent 3 hours at that birthday party. I didn't crash it. Exactly, Michael didn't ask me to leave. But I also wasn't exactly welcomed. I talked to my grandson, whose name was James. I learned that he liked soccer and video games and was struggling in math. I learned that he had my nose and Michael's eyes. I learned that he existed in a world where his grandmother was an absence. I was suddenly present. When I left, I didn't expect reconciliation. I didn't expect apologies or hugs. I expected confusion and resentment, and possibly for things to get worse before they got better. What I got was something different. Movement. After that day, Michael called me. Not to apologize, but to say that he'd talked to his father. He admitted it, Michael said, his voice small. The affairs. He said you knew and you left to protect your own sanity. He said he told me you were the problem because it was easier than admitting he was. I'm sorry you had to find that out. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I thought protecting you from the truth would be kinder than telling you that your father was a liar. I was wrong. Michael started calling me once a week after that. Nothing dramatic. We talked about work, about his kids, about Emma. It was tentative, but it was something Emma took longer. She'd been so invested in the narrative of my selfishness that accepting a different version required dismantling a significant part of her identity. But slowly, through conversations with Michael and her own reflection, she began to understand. A year after the birthday party, Emma called me and asked if I'd like to have dinner with her and her family. I cried when she made the invitation. Sorry, she said during that dinner, for all these years. For believing what you said about yourself when you never said anything. Oh, sorry too. For leaving the way I did. For trying to be noble instead of honest. You should have told us. I should have. You're right. The reconciliation wasn't linear. It took years of conversations, of rebuilding trust, of learning to be around each other without the weight of 10 years of resentment and misunderstanding. But it happened. Richard was patient through it all. He understood that my children weren't an intrusion on our life. They were a part of my life that had been amputated, and I was learning to reintegrate them, even if it was awkward and difficult. 3 years after I crashed that birthday party, I sat in my apartment with both my children and their families. We were having dinner, the first time we'd all been together in 15 years. My grandchildren called me Grandma, though they said it tentatively, like they were still learning what that meant. I've been thinking about something I said at one point. About what? Michael asked. About how I spent 10 years waiting for you to forgive me, when I should have been spending that time understanding why you were angry. I focused on your rejection instead of on your pain. We focused on the wrong thing too, Emma said. We believed what we wanted to believe. That's on us. Maybe it's on all of us, I said. Maybe family is about learning to hold complexity, to understand that people can be selfish and sacrificial at the same time. That someone can leave a marriage and still love their children. That motives can be mixed and people can be broken and we can still choose to be together. Michael reached across the table and took my hand. I lost so much time, I said. So did we, Emma said. But we're here now. Now at 60, I see myself clearly for the first time. I'm not the villain of my children's story. I'm not the noble martyr of my own story. I'm just a woman who made choices, some of them good and some of them harmful, and who is still learning how to live with the consequences. Richard and I got married 5 years ago. My children came to the wedding. Michael walked me down the aisle not traditionally, just as a statement. This is my mother. And I choose her. Emma gave a speech about how it took her years to understand that her mother's choice to leave wasn't a rejection of her, but an assertion of self. She said, I taught my daughter that women should stay no matter what. And then I watched my mother refuse to stay, and I was angry. But now I see that both choices are valid. Staying and going. Both take courage. My mother showed me that by refusing to disappear. I cried through the whole thing. The thing about being erased and then found again is that you never quite forget what it felt like to be invisible. I carry that knowledge with me. It makes me more present with the people I love. It makes me less tolerant of being taken for granted. It makes me understand the cost of silence. I tell my grandchildren stories about their grandmother now. I'm present for school plays and soccer games and homework help. I'm the grandmother who shows up, not out of obligation, but out of genuine presence. Sometimes Michael or Emma will ask me about my decade of absence. What did you do? They ask, and it sounds like they're asking what I was doing during the time I wasn't their mother. I lived, I tell them. I learned to be myself when I couldn't be your mother. I learned that being alone doesn't have to mean being lonely. I learned that some choices, even the hard ones, aren't wrong just because they hurt. Do you regret it? Emma asked once. I regret the years we lost. I regret not being honest sooner. But I don't regret choosing myself. Because if I hadn't, you wouldn't have your mother, you'd have had a ghost. A woman slowly disappearing under the weight of sacrifice. And that wouldn't have been good for either of us. I was rejected by my children. I returned 10 years later and left them speechless. But more importantly, I returned as my self-honest, present, no longer trying to be the woman everyone else needed me to be. And that's what left them speechless. Not the revelation about their father. Not the explanation for my choice. But the fact that I showed up at all. Unapologetic, real, ready to be part of their lives. If you've been rejected by someone you love, if you've been erased, if you've been forced to disappear to avoid conflict, please subscribe. This channel is about stories like this. Stories about people who refuse to stay invisible. Stories about the courage it takes to show up, even when you're not invited. Stories about what happens when you choose yourself and then learn to choose your people again. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for witnessing this story. That matters more than you know.